Roshi.
Hi, Shaun.
Good to see you.
Good to see you again. So, please take a seat. Thank you.
As fast from A to B as we possibly could, which is going straight.
真逆とまでいかないんですけど、今まで自分たちがこういいと思ってたリズムとまた違う。
And so I think that that's really important, is just maybe finding a way of rowing that every Japan crew can understand and adopt.
ショーンとトムが来て一番初めに乗った8で本当に出たこともないような数値が出てUT ベースなんですけど、
You know, bring everyone together, having everyone rowing the same, so you're just slotting into a Japan team, has huge impact, a huge benefit.
自分が体験できて本当に有意義だったなっていうふうに。
Well done. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shaun, thank you very much for joining us today. So we would like to ask you about your rowing experience here in Japan and back in New Zealand and internationally. So congratulations again for your stunning performance in all Japan championships. So that was a really nice experience for us Japanese rowers and coaches to see your performance on Seaforth Waterway. Okay, the first question. So we understand you retired from rowing after Tokyo Olympics. So what brings you back to rowing?
Yeah, I suppose originally I decided to retire because I felt like I had given a lot of myself to the sport. I'd given a decade of my life to the sport at the highest level. And basically I had achieved the one thing that I really wanted to achieve. And so that was what really prompted me to retire from the sport. I sort of had fallen out of love with the sport, and I decided to, hang up the oars. In saying that, a bit of time passed, and although I still don't at the time really feel the urge to be back in a Olympic level boat class or rowing at an elite level boat class, I still saw the opportunity to come here and row in a Japan team is pretty exciting. And so I just thought that, I'm young enough to still do this. I'm still fit enough. I think that I could come in and have a really positive impact for the Toyota team. And so that's all it really was, basically, is me wanting to visit Japan and spend some more time here, and also row in a way that was maybe slightly less pressure than what I had experienced previously. And so that was quite an exciting prospect for me.
This time training with Toyota BOSHOKU rowing team. So is that third time for you to visit Japan?
Yes, so first time was Tokyo Olympics, and then I returned for, basically at the Tokyo Olympics, we couldn't interact with the Japanese public, and an opportunity came up from Hiroshi, who wanted us to come back and share some learnings with the people of Japan. And so I had a second trip, which was a couple of weeks before the Toyota rowing trip, where I came over with the sports scientist Justin, and we basically spent time showing a bit of appreciation for the city of Otsu for hosting us before the Olympics. And we were a complete open book with sharing all the secrets of the New Zealand rowing team. So that was my second trip, and then back in New Zealand for all of 2 weeks, and then over here for another 2 months. So it was quite a string of events, but it was quite enjoyable, quite hectic, but a lot of fun.
Oh, that's a great story. So thank you for coming back to Japan to share your experience with us. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Japanese Rowing Society, I'd like to thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It was it was a real honour to come back and show appreciation for the support that was given, not only to the New Zealand rowing team, but the support of the Japanese people for the Olympics. I know it was happening during a very tough time, and so for the games to be able to go ahead was amazing. And obviously I've got very fond memories of being here in Japan because the regatta went so well for us. And every moment I've spent here in Japan, I've just been constantly reminded of the amazing people that are here, how gracious and generous they are. And there's a lot that I really enjoy about Japanese culture that's going to keep on giving me reasons to come back here.
I'm so glad to hear that. So at least you love Japan.
Yes,
Okay.
very much so.
Great. Okay, let me ask about some in depth in rowing. Why did you choose Japan and Toyota BOSHOKU to come back to the competitive rowing?
I think that often you get opportunities and you're not quite sure where they're going to come from. And I think that this was a case of an opportunity popped up in a country that I knew I really liked, for people that I had great respect for, in a company that I have admired. And so it was really a no-brainer. There was obviously, I'm having to take 2 months away from my life in New Zealand, so there's an opportunity cost there. I have a business that I run, and so I had a few things to sort of consider, and a lovely girlfriend back at home who's looking after the dogs. And so I had a few things to consider, but there was a really big draw in being back here in Japan. And so when the opportunity came up, I thought it was amazing. In my 10-day trip that I was here before this trip started, I actually managed to visit the Toyota boat shed where we are right now, just to get an idea of the type of people that I'd be working with, the facilities, the setup. And immediately that visit reaffirmed my thoughts around that this would be an awesome opportunity.
That sounds like there was a mixture of the feeling. It's not just the rowing specific thing. So you love the people, you love the country.
Yes.
So that's why.
Yeah, and I also really like the idea of, I'm competitive. I'm very, very, very competitive. I've always been very competitive. And hearing the story and the narrative around, there's this crew that's been winning every All Japan 8s title for the last 7 years. The moment I hear that, I instinctively want to beat them. And so that's the NTT crew I'm talking about. So hearing that story and hearing about Toyota's struggles trying to win that event and trying to be competitive against much bigger rowing programs they're coming up against, I straight away saw a David versus Goliath type relationship. And it just reminded me of the Kiwi 8, and I really love a challenge. And so I just saw that as another challenge to take on. And managed to rope in another teammate from the Kiwi 8 crew, and we had a very similar mindset of nothing to lose, everything to gain, and a lot of good we can do for Japanese rowing, I think, in sharing our knowledge of the sport.
For you, beating NTT was very similar, like beating Germany or Great Britain, the big powerhouse of rowing.
Well, I think that there were similarities in some aspects and differences. So I think that for the rest of the team, minus myself and Tom, it was like they had won the Olympics. And so that was the really gratifying part for Tom and I, is not so much winning for ourselves as winning and helping them win, our teammates win. Because I think that they probably might have thought that NTT were a little bit unbeatable. And so just to shatter some of those illusions around what you can do. And so I think for the rest of the Toyota team, it certainly felt like beating a Germany or beating Great Britain. For Tom and I, it felt like just satisfaction for showing them that they could.
Okay, so what have you done to make Toyota BOSHOKU to go faster? What have you changed? What have you not changed?
I'll start with what we haven't changed and what we didn't need to address is the work ethic. Huge work ethic. Right from the get-go, these guys work hard, there's no question. They have as much determination as any Olympic level crew. They want to go fast, they want to improve, and they have focus on improving. So that was something we didn't touch. We didn't need to crack the whip on work ethic. It was always there. The changes we made were focused on technique, the way we want to row the boat, the way we set up the boat, and also building a team culture where there was a bit of belief in these two things. So both the way we wanted to row, the technical setup, and building a culture that helped us believe in those changes. And so the first things we did when we got here was we really tried to teach the team how to move a boat effectively, how to use your body weight. We focused at the beginning on using the swing of the body to create momentum, to create acceleration and rhythm. And then we focused for a long time on the actual pickup of the blade, pickup of the catch. And so we really spelled out the type of rhythm that we wanted to row in an 8. We always talked about catch, swing, rhythm. And we used a lot of visuals in the way we described that, like hand gestures in the way we described that, how the boat is this big monster of a thing and you've just got to move with fluidity around it. So we focused on big swingu, quick catcher, and good rizumu.
In Japanese, yes.
And we just knuckled down. It was very simple focus, a very, very simple focus. We did away with this idea of rating really high. We really wanted to pull the guys down, so we just knew that 36, 37 with this big rhythm, this big pronounced catch swing rhythm, that was the way to go. Getting grip on the blade, not hurrying up the slide. So we just really focused on those aspects over and over again so that every stroke, we were just trying to optimize that every stroke was like that. Even in training at 20 rating, we were thinking about this big rhythm that was going to transfer up to 37, 36 rate. And we made a lot of setup changes to the boat that enabled those technical changes. So some of the first things we did is that we assessed the gearing on the oars to understand how heavily geared the team were, and we found them to be extremely light with the gearing, which lends itself to rating high and spinning the wheels. And so we systematically increased the gearing of the blades, made them heavier and heavier over time. Tom and I were assessing how much these guys could handle in terms of gearing. We knew that they're not going to be able to row at the same gearing as the Kiwi 8, but we want to get closer to that. And so for reference, when we came here, they were rowing on gearing in an 8 that would be lighter than gearing I would row in a pair back in New Zealand. So that is far too light for an 8. So we made the gearing quite a bit heavier, which helped with the rhythm. It wasn't as up and down the slide. And we adjusted a lot within the boat. We lowered the feet so that the boys were able to get to the front with comfort. There's a notion in Japan, and I'm not sure where it's come from, is that having really high feet helps keep your drive nice and flat. And now we didn't talk once about having a flat drive. In fact, we talked about this big rhythm that almost felt like a big pendulum. That was the idea. Obviously you want to drive flat, but you also want to be able to open the body. And we used the feet, we lowered the feet a little bit more so the boys were able to get to a really strong position at the catch without getting in the way of themselves. So if your feet are too high, you actually get stuck and you have to rely a lot on some pretty extreme flexibility to get length. Where if you just lower the feet slightly, you all of a sudden have all this a lot more room to get to the front turn. So instantly you could see the boys were able to get there in a really strong position. A few of them commented that it doesn't feel flat anymore, and we assured them that the way we were moving was correct. It's going to feel different, but for the most part, the boys adapted really quickly. So that was another big change we made to enable the rhythm that we were teaching. We also tightened up some pitch on some of the blades as well. So we noticed a few of the boys were quite washy, and so we adjusted pitch on the blade. I think some coaches will try and coach the athlete to make a lot of changes so that they just manually manipulate the oar so it's buried, where I've always found it's more effective if the athlete's rowing quite well, just to adjust gearing and the gait so that they can grip the water better and more naturally. So we made a few adjustments like that, and those are I think the major changes we made. We also focused a little bit on foot stretcher position as well.
Closer to you.
Sorry?
Closer to the bow.
It was different for each person. We basically, the main goal was just to make sure the blades were parallel at the catch and finish. And so we would get shots of the 8 from behind, a video shot, and we would assess whether everyone is getting to the same entry point. And if they weren't, again, we would look at them and see if there's rigging adjustments we can make that will enable this athlete to get to that same entry point. Rather than just telling them to row longer, we actually first and foremost adjusted the setup so that they were able to row longer easier. So a few changes like that, and then just a big focus on that rhythm, and just making it. The words I used was I used a couple of analogies to describe the rhythm, and so in terms of picking up the catch, I often use the idea of a samurai catch,
yep.
as opposed to a Viking. And so there's this temptation in rowing where you just want to get the boat in, and then you're all tense up here, and then you're just pulling it in, and it's loud, you're making a lot of noise like a Viking would, and you can see tension all in the arms, and that is really normal. And Tom and I got the idea through to the boys that we are not like that. We are rubbery, we are elastic. Like a samurai whipping out his blade and putting it back in, there is no excess motion. There is just what's required to do the job. And so we talked about the catch being like a samurai's blade as opposed to a big Viking swinging an axe, which is a great analogy. And it really helped the boys realize that you didn't need to and throw your body at it or really reach for it. You just put the blade in. It's a really simple sport. You just put it in with like no extra effort or no excess effort, and really quick and accurate. And so that was one analogy we used over and over again. We're samurais in the boat. We're accurate, but we're powerful. And another idea I got that we managed to get through was the idea that the rhythm we were creating was our religion. So it's a pretty abstract, a strange thing to say, but catch, swing, rhythm, this is our religion. And so I wanted the boys to believe so fully in how we were doing it, because that's a lot of what rowing is that you just get a whole team to believe fully in the way you're doing it. There's heaps of different ways you can row. The most powerful thing is having everyone in the crew believing in the way that you've chosen to row. And so for us, it was samurai catch, big swing, big rhythm, letting the boat run and trusting it. That was the religion, basically. So I wanted the boys to they could wake up in the middle of the night and I'll be like, what's our religion? Catch, swing, rhythm. And so even now when you talk to the boys, hopefully they remember that idea. So any boat they're rowing in, it's just catch, swing, rhythm. That this is all you have to focus on. Like every rower's got their small little intricacies and nuances of stuff they need to change, whether it's the way they hold the blade, the way they hold the head, might be bending of the elbow slightly differently, or heaps of tiny little things. But the most important things in rowing are catching the boat, driving the boat, swinging it, and creating rhythm. And so I was sort of really big on teaching the boys to zoom out a little bit. So we weren't just focused on these tiny little details of the stroke. We were focused on the big picture and doing it together. So yeah, I've rambled on for quite a while there, talking about what we did, but it was a big question, and the short answer is we did a lot to change the way these boys operated, and I was incredibly proud of the way they responded and the changes we made in 6 weeks. It's taken this team from where they were to where they ended up. Yeah, pretty satisfying, and it's a testament to the guys at how quickly they were able to respond and adapt to some new guidance.
That's a great way, very awesome way to describe rowing: catch, swing, rhythm. That's a religion.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Well, I was on the commentary seat, the grandstand of the All Japan Championships, and everybody around us were talking about the way you rowed the 8.
Yes.
So the technically really different. The way to the BOSHOKU rowed and the way NTT and Torre, the silver and bronze medalists rowed.
Yeah.
So very interested, and the people were very curious about you guys put yourselves 2 gold medalists on the same side. So people were very curious about that. Was there any issue of steering when you rowed, when you train and when you race?
So I think, again, I like the idea of bringing this back to the analogy of a samurai versus a Viking. Like, I think bad rowers who are really strong will jump in a boat and think that they're a big macho man for pulling it round and be like, oh, I was just too strong. But that's actually not good rowing. Rowing a boat and the boat crabbing to the side is slow rowing. That's pushing it to the side. And so even though Tom and we're strong athletes, the idea is we're propelling the boat backwards behind us, not sideways. And once you get that idea in your head, because it's like a schoolboy mentality. When I was at school and I rowed in pairs, you would try and pull the guy around. And yes, it works to an extent if you're rowing with another strong athlete. But for the most part, everyone rows a different type of stroke. And so you can row really, really badly and pull somebody round. So it was never an issue. Basically, we'd get in, and if we noticed that the boat was crabbing, we would adjust so that we were going as fast from A to B as we possibly could, which is going straight. And that doesn't mean that we're backing off the power. It means that we're applying the power with the team in the direction that we're trying to travel. And so, yeah, it was never really an issue for us at all. The only points we noticed it were maybe the first 5 strokes off the start. But if anything, that was probably because our bowman, Ken, had a really sharp catch and was able to get a good grip on it, and he's got a leverage advantage. So it's not an issue. And even rowing in the pair, I've been rowing with the guys in the pair. The whole goal was to work together in a pair. And so, yes, if I rowed like a Viking, I could pull them round, but that's not going to help anyone. The whole idea is, just moving the boat in one direction. When Tom and I arrived, we quickly decided what seats we wanted to be in. And there was never a thought of swapping sides or anything, because it just wasn't necessary.
I really agree about that. Yeah. Very often, the strong rowers are not quite very strong on the pair. When you see race, probably Mr. Obata, the team manager of Toyota BOSHOKU, when he was young, he rowed for the Japanese team for a long time. And probably myself and Mr. Obata had the same experience. Like
Yeah.
we were all the time we were pulled around.
Yes.
So the weaker rowers can beat us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel the
Yeah.
same way. Yeah.
And it's a mistake that I've done as well. Like thinking, I want to go fast. As a young athlete, I just work really hard and show how strong I am in the boat, and you get beaten because you're just rowing like a Viking and not going very fast.
It's not a way to make the boat faster.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's like the sport is. Yes, you have to be extremely strong, but you have to be very intelligent about the way you apply your power, and that's the difference between like a good rower and a really great rower is the ability to apply power in the correct way with your team, because it is a team sport.
Okay, so they revealed that the strokeman of the 8 was very sick until the day before the final. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm sure he was not in his full scale in the final day, and he was quite anxious, I assume.
Yes.
So what did you advise him before the race?
Yeah, Woody, our stroke man, he was actually quite sick in the lead up to the heat as well. We didn't quite realise. Woody is a fantastic stroke man because he sets this lovely levered stroke with this nice body movement that Tom and I, that's what we were teaching, and Woody was doing this really naturally. So he was the perfect pick for stroke seat. And we had no idea that he was quite sick. He was really struggling, and I think he was struggling more so in the heat. And so we did the first race, and because you're obviously working maximally in that race, and Woody's feeling sick, he immediately after the race, that's when it hit him, and he was in a pretty bad way. And so for the 2 days between the heat and the final, we couldn't actually row the 8 because Woody was in such bad shape. He was on bed rest. And so, yeah, you get a little bit nervous about that. I haven't been in a situation before where I haven't been able to row the 2 days before the final. But the boys stayed pretty focused. And so we did various different things to help bring the focus into the team. We did a lot of breathing exercises to calm the guys down. And then eventually Woody sort of emerged from his room. He was feeling a little bit better, and this is the night before the final. And we sat down, and we were worried that Woody was going to be head down, feeling like he had failed us by getting sick. And it's just part of rowing. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, before big races, something will go wrong. Something will always go wrong. In the Olympics, we had a guy rowing on 2 stress fractures. That was something that went really wrong. We lost our heat at the Olympics and then had to go through the repechage. That could be considered as something that went wrong. And Tom and I just saw this as another one of those things. Like, we expected something was going to go wrong, and this was it. And we told Woody, we're like, look, it could have happened to anyone. It's not your fault. Please don't feel that there's any pressure on you. If anything, it's on the rest of the team behind you now to step up. And so we often talked about how each person was responsible for 12.5% of the boat. And so if Woody could only contribute 11%, then we had 7 guys that had to pick up 1.5%. So that's, when you put it like that, it's only a small percentage each that we have to rise to the occasion. And I could see instantly that Woody was just a sense of relief, and that we trusted him to do the job regardless of how he felt. His job was to set this lovely rhythm that he always rows. And even if he was down on power, we have 7 motivated, determined guys behind him who are going to row with catch, swing, rhythm. And we just saw it as a non-issue. It's one of those things that if you think it's an issue, if you obsess over it being an issue, it becomes an issue. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, yeah, I think we helped put Woody's mind at ease a little bit that, yeah, we're going to back you up. And we believe you could be at 50% capacity, 30% capacity, you're still the man for the job. There is no other guy we can put in here that will be able to do as good a job as you.
That story can make me cry still. Yeah, so staying calm is very, very hard for me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Very nice story.
It is. I think it's so important. It's the thing I've learned from being in an 8 for a decade, is that yes, like you've got all your athletes, you've got their erg scores, how much power they produce, you've got the way they row, and then you've got this other thing, this abstract thing, which is your culture, like your team trust. Like how much do the team actually believe in what we are doing and our ability to perform well? And that's the thing that can take a crew from just being all right to all of a sudden being able to do amazing things. And that's what we were able to do in the Kiwi 8. We had this team culture of just, I like the idea of aggressive trust. Like you believe in it so much that it's almost aggressive how much you believe in it. And that's what I wanted to get through with the Toyota team, is that we were just going to live or die by this rhythm regardless of what happens.
Well, you've been involved in New Zealand's heavyweight sweep team for almost a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And your career as a senior athlete is not necessarily really on the top, the top of the podium. It's a long time of hard working for you in your life and sacrificing the ordinary life for a very long time.
Yes.
So how did you motivate yourself?
Yeah, I've had a really bumpy career in rowing. I've talked about it a lot. Like I've lost a lot of races, and the idea of the men's 8 started in 2013, and we failed so many times trying to get it right. We had no idea how to do it, how to form a team. Everything I've just talked about is a sum of my knowledge that I've learned over the last 10 years, and so over that 10 years. I had to learn all of this stuff by losing a lot. Unless there was no 8th dynasty in New Zealand or anything like that, we were it. And so we were the people that were learning how to do this, learning how to compete against the British, against the Germans. And so there was a lot of struggle trying to get up to speed. And yeah, it took a decade. It took a decade to get to where we needed to give some perspective. When you're starting from square one with no knowledge, 10 years to become the best. And yes, part of that is staying motivated. Obviously you've got to be motivated. I think the motivation is the flint that sparks, that gets things going, but the thing that gets you through is just discipline. Like I would say 9 times out of 10 I wake up in the morning and I'm not very motivated. All I want to do is go back to sleep, skip this training, just relax. The one thing that I'm always is disciplined. Because I believe in, I feel like I have a responsibility to my teammates. And so I think that's the thing in rowing that gets you through, is that you shouldn't expect to be motivated. Motivation is fleeting, it'll sort of come and go. But the discipline and the belief in what you are doing, that is something that can be learned, that can be ingrained over time. And it is like a snowball. And so the more disciplined you get, the more disciplined you get, the more disciplined you get, if that makes sense. So it just builds and builds and builds.
Okay. The final race of the All Japan Championships was as if a replay of the Olympic final. You were very strong in the middle. So was that something you planned to do before the race?
We were all about just finding our rhythm, basically. We knew that we had trained very well beforehand, and we had done some really good pieces beforehand. we knew we had really good staying power. So if we got on this rhythm, because we were down at a slightly lower stroke rate, it was just more efficient. And so, and I think that what you see in the video, both in the Olympic final and in the All Japan's final, it's not us being stronger, it's not us going faster in the middle of the race or in the third 500, it's us slowing down less than the other crews. So often you have really fast first 500, and then a slightly slower second 500, then your slowest 500 is your third 500, and then a slightly faster last 500. Our plan basically was to find a rhythm that would sustain us through the middle kilometers with as little fade as possible. And so, yeah, it was, we never really planned to move at certain points. All we planned was about finding this rhythm. One key aspect was the way we came off the start. And so we had a really, a line in the sand, 250 meters in, we are driving down to 37. And that was non-negotiable. 250 in, we drive to 37. And similar to the Olympic final, you hit 37 and then you are just sending it every stroke. You are in that rhythm and it feels weirdly calm. So it feels like you've got a lot of time between strokes. You could get the sense that NTT were beside us, rating a lot higher, but they were not getting as much grip on the oar as we were. And so we sort of knew that if we just trusted this rhythm, stayed on this rhythm, regardless of where everyone else was, that it was our way of getting from point A to point B as fast as possible. And so wherever that ended up, whether we were first, second, or last, this is the way we knew how to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. So we were going to stick with it. And yeah, that's what you could see. We were just, third 500, we were just sticking with our rhythm.
Now I might ask the same question you answered now. Mm-hmm. Recently, the New Zealanders' strong crews has a very strong middle body of the race. Is that the same philosophy you feel?
Yeah, I think that New Zealanders do have a very, very volume-based program. So we just row a lot of kilometers. We build a lot of that sinewy strength and fitness that really helps in the middle part of a race. So that's always been a New Zealand strength, is the programming, the science behind our program is designed to enhance our middle kilometer. And then also, because we have such a competitive environment in New Zealand, where we're constantly going up against our crewmates and our team, we learn pretty quickly what works and what doesn't. And so you refer back to that when you're in the heat of battle, in the middle of a race. You're like, I know this works because I've done it 1,000 times in training. And so you stick with it, and often that helps New Zealand crews move through. And with the Toyota team, it was more or less the same. We trained hard and we focused on our own boat and our own rhythm, similar to what we did in New Zealand. The volume was less than what we would do in New Zealand. The New Zealand program is pretty ridiculous in terms of how many Ks we row. And because Tom and I were only here for 6 weeks, we didn't really have the luxury to take it to the extreme with volume, and I was coming out of retirement to do so. So we probably were training about 80% of the load is what the New Zealand rowing team would train at. And that was enough to get us really fit for that middle K.
Okay, so could you please give us suggestions what we should do to make the Japanese go faster, Japanese boats to go faster?
Yeah, I do think that, everything I've talked about, everything I've talked about in the way that the Toyota crew rowed, that is a more effective way to build boat speed that's scalable. So rating really, really high, 40, 41, there is a limit to how much speed you can get out of a boat. And my opinion was that if, say, the NTT crew, if they rode a similar rhythm to Toyota, they're probably better man for man. They're a stronger crew, got more national athletes. If they rode like that, they'd go a lot faster. And so I think that that's really important, is just maybe finding a way of rowing that every Japan crew can understand and adopt. Because at the moment, from just a glance, the Japanese rowing style seems to be very upright and very hurried. And we talked about the setup. There's some setup things in Japan rowing that are quite strange, with foot stretcher height, that being one of the key ones. Also gearing on the blades. And so I think that some of those fundamentals, if they changed, it would have a huge impact. And getting all of the Japan, say, company crews and top-level crews rowing in a similar way, and being able to feed into the Japan rowing team, and not have to, bring everyone together, having everyone rowing the same, so you're just slotting into a Japan team, has huge impact, a huge benefit. We talked about also encouraging more domestic competition as well. So when I was here with Justin, we talked about if there's a bunch of different clubs training on one lake in New Zealand, there would just be racing. There'd be long distance racing. There'd be opportunity to test yourself every day, and encouraging a bit of side-by-side training so that you can experiment and make changes and see what works and what doesn't. And so I've talked about sort of the way we rode, some rigging stuff and some maybe structure stuff around a bit more competition. But there's also the other idea of removing any mental crutches. Do you know that the term remove a mental crutch? So there is the thought in rowing that you have to be big and strong to win. And although aspects of that are true, there are so many examples of smaller athletes winning at the highest level. And so whether I'm correct in saying this or not, I do believe that there is a mental crutch in Japan rowing, that our athletes are a bit smaller, so it's really hard to compete. And I just think that holds people back, because the more it's said, or you look at other crews and you're like, wow, that guy's so strong and big, how are we ever going to beat him? It's like, well, he's already won because you think that. And see, I've raced so many athletes that are far, far bigger than me. I remember racing some of the Romanian crew that were near 7 foot and 110 kgs, and talking to them, they're towering over me. And I'm like, wow, I'm faster than you. I just believe it. There's just no way that you're going to beat me. And I think that little bit of attitude in Japan rowing would help a lot, is that it's not about just how big and strong you are, and especially so in lightweights. I think that it becomes an excuse in rowing that athletes, they're just smaller. We sort of proved with the Toyota team that we've got our bow seat, 2-seat, and 4-seat. We're all really short, smaller guys, but they were applying just as much power, and they were just as effective as everyone else in the boat. And yeah, I think that is a really big thing, is having a bit of belief that it's not all about how big and strong you are. Removing that sort of, it's like a unspoken handbrake, basically. That was the thing that we sort of found even in the Kiwi 8, because we were typically a smaller crew compared to our competition. And the moment you just let that idea go and you realize, well, everyone's a human, everyone's trying to do the same thing, everyone's nervous about racing, all you can do is what you can. So even rowing with some of these Japanese crews. I rode in a 4 with Woody, Mao, and Kore. They've shortened their names so I can say them. But I rode in that 4, and I was like, yeah, this 4 is a genuine, I would think, mid 550s 4, like the way it felt. And I was like, this is just a throw together 4. And I think that those guys were getting confidence that I was in the boat. But what I was trying to get through to the idea is that I'm only one person. Another Japanese rower could jump into this boat and you could have a competitive international 4. But you have to believe that you're going to be competitive. Not that, oh, we're a bit smaller. It's like, no, screw that. Believe that you are there for a reason. So, yeah, I think I'm big on the mental approach to rowing, as you can sort of tell. And yeah, it gets me really excited about that sort of, again, that David versus Goliath battle, where I see Japan rowing as the David that's going to take on the British and the Germans and the New Zealanders. Like, that makes me excited, the idea of taking them on and like going for the gold. And if you come up short, like, it doesn't matter. If you come up short, you're probably going to land further up the rankings than what you would have if you were just going for a B final or a C final. If you go for the top and you end up 4th or 5th, you're still in a better position than what you would have been otherwise. It's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, thank you, Shaun, for giving us a big, huge homework to me and to Oba. Yeah, if the Japanese team are not doing well in coming years, so that's our responsibility. That's our fault.
Oh, it happens. It's like, it's part of sport.
Yeah.
And it's happened to me. Like, I've been beaten down by losses for 10 years, and you start racing for different purposes. You're like, oh, I just don't want to embarrass myself. Like, I just want to at least be competitive. And you have to break out of that cycle, that cycle of thinking.
Okay, so one last question.
Yes.
Please tell us about your best row in your life. So not necessarily the competitive rowing.
Best row of my life.
Yeah, where and what made it the best.
Okay, I'm going to talk about 2 rows.
Okay.
Two rows in particular. So the obvious choice would be like, oh, the Olympic final. But the Olympic final, although it was amazing, I remember one stroke in there where I had a really bad stroke, and it's going to piss me off for the rest of my life, where I fluffed a stroke, and I was like, oh, well, I fluffed a stroke in the Olympic final. It didn't mean anything. Like, I just didn't get grip of the water, and I was like, oh, that was a bad one, and then we continued on. But I'm still going to remember that stroke. So the Olympic final wasn't the one I would remember. The day before the Olympic final, we rowed 8K up and down Sea Forest Waterway, and I've never been in a boat that was just so on as that Kiwi 8. To give you some, because I'm big on numbers, we're paddling down the course, feeling really comfortable and easy, 21 rate at 132, just paddling down the course. And it was just explosive, like I've never felt before. And in that moment, I was like, well, this is the best rowing I've ever done in my life. And I think that it's the best rowing that anyone in this crew has ever done in their life. And we've got the Olympic final tomorrow. So what a time to be reaching your absolute peak. So I remember that really clearly. The way that 8 just thundered down the course at U2, U3. It was, that's one thing that 8 was incredible at, is just speed at 20 rate. And the other row I remember, and it's become quite a hilarious story that I tell, is the first time, I would have been 20, the first time I was competitive with Hamish and Eric. So I was rowing with a friend of mine, Michael Berry, and we were sort of a crappy Waikato pair. And I hadn't done really anything. I was just scraping around trying to make New Zealand age group teams. But me and Michael Berry had a race where we led Hamish and Eric, the Olympic champions, to the 1K mark. And as a sort of a reasonably fresh out of high school student, to lead Hamish and Eric to the 1K mark, I will forever tell that story until I'm 50 or 60 in the pubs, how we almost got Hamish and Eric. They then proceeded to beat us by 25 seconds in that race, but we did get them to the 1K. And so me and Michael, who I was rowing with, Michael Berry, we will forever tell that story about how we had them sweating. I mean, the reality is Hamish and Eric don't even remember that race, but I remember that race.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. That was a very, very good interview. Thank you for spending time with us and sharing your experience
Yes.
with us. So now this is our turn to learn, to put out more from your experience and to get our Japanese rowing proceed to the hopefully internationally top of the world.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Roshi. Been a pleasure.
Yeah.